Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, constant reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by Colorado's very own hedge animal. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
No, I'm getting covered in snow, but don't worry, it'll fall off me when you're not watching.
I'm imagining just you, the human person you, like being covered in snow every time I look at you.
Uh-huh.
But as soon as I look away, dun dun.
Slump. It's snowing. That's why this is a funny joke. It's because it's actually snowing right now.
I mean, you were a mere hour away from the Stanley Hotel as well. So.
That's true.
This week, we continue with part 6 of our ongoing series covering Stephen King's The Shining with chapters 32 through 37. Things at the Overlook continue to get worse as Jack sabotages their only means for escape, and the hedge animals get a little too close for comfort. Danny finally discovers the horrible meaning of red rum and calls out to Dick for help. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
Continues to ratchet up the horror in the sense of we're trapped in a building with a man who is losing his mind. That is the focus, I think, this week. There's a lot of great set pieces that we're obviously going to spend time on. Just some really great visuals. Like, this is a book that is really making my visual imagination go into overdrive. Like, just a lot of scenes where I find I kind of I'll like stop and picture what's being described, and then only then will I move on. Which that's just really fun. I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great fun. This is I was thinking about this week as compared to like last week where we had like 7,000 individual little things to talk about, and I think here we're more kind of ramping up and escalating towards our climax. So there's certainly bits and pieces to talk about, but I don't think we're going to go to quite the depth we did this week, despite the fact that there's still tons going on here. But it is, I think, more. It feels wrong to say more action focused because it's mostly just people talking still, but it just feels a little bit more action focused here.
And I think there's more distinct scenes this week. Sure. Last week we kind of dwelled in what was fundamentally like one drawn out event, whereas this is sort of punctuated. In fact, interestingly, I think quite a lot of time passes, and because we're given some dates here and there, but it's like we sort of lose our track of time. We lose our feeling for time because we're entering into this realm where if we were watching like a film version of this, you would see like Jack's hair becoming longer and his beard becoming more unkempt or whatever to illustrate like a lot of time is actually passing between these scenes potentially.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a month, right? I think it's early November at the beginning of the week, and then by the end of our chapters this week, it's December 1st. So yeah, we've almost traveled a month over the course of these chapters.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do that, we did just want to remind y'all about our Patreon exclusive bonus podcast we do once a month called Other Levels of the Tower. That's where we take a look at a Stephen King adaptation and talk about it for a little bit. This month, we talked about the Netflix adaptation of Stephen King's 1922 with Thomas Jane, a movie I think we both really liked a lot, actually. And it was a pretty good conversation, a little bit of a shorter conversation compared to some months, but that's just because I think that movie is very simple and good and what it is, but still a good conversation, I think. So if you want to check that out, you can head over to patreon.com/doofmedia and donate to us at the $10 level or higher, and you get access to that episode and, gosh, a bunch more. So many more.
All of the other ones as well. Yeah, that's a movie I hadn't heard of at all, and I was absolutely delighted. I really liked it. So yeah, go check that out. And
next month, we will be doing the infamous Lawnmower Man, so that's going to be really fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, folks, let's get into it with chapter 32, titled The Bedroom. And normally it would be a little sarcastic for me to say the bedroom like that, but not in this chapter.
In this chapter, it's entirely appropriate.
Our chapter begins in the bedroom. Jack has responded to his son's almost strangling at the hands of, at best case, some creepy lady that has broken into the hotel with a cot. He got a cot out and now Danny's going to sleep in their room with them. So that's, we did it. It's everything's fine now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the universal parenting solution. Whether the problem is vomiting or nightmares or bathtub ghost, a cot is never a bad idea.
My son had a nightmare for like the first time ever the other week, and like we got to this real like watershed moment in parenting, I think, where we were like, are we gonna let him sleep in the bed with us tonight, or is this the thing we're gonna establish? And we ended up saying no. We ended up hanging out with him until he calmed down and then putting him back to bed, and I'm so glad of it. But no, it is a bring the kid into your room is the solution to all problems.
Yep.
So while Danny sleeps on, Jack is standing there looking over his play with, quote, smoldering ill temper, which is just a lovely phrase. I love that so much. And Jack realizes, Matt, that his play is shit, actually. It's awful. It's rote, it's derivative, and it's bad. And while I'm usually like on team, I think that Jack is being a little bit overly self-deprecating here. He's probably right? This is probably actually shitty play.
It probably is. I mean, it's probably not bad for the reasons he thinks it is. Like, it's probably bad because it's the product of his own like internal dishonesty and self-contradiction, and it's what we've been joking about this whole time, which is that he doesn't really understand why he's writing the play.
Yeah.
Although like we have enough insight into his character to understand him better than he understands himself. But of course, he's in this moment, it's not like he is gaining clarity. He's just gaining like a different twisted mirror to look upon himself.
It's so funny though, because he's like so close, right? Like I think he's actually really close to the truth here, because he does, you're absolutely right. He looks at the play, and the problem he sees with it is, the big problem he sees with it is that he kind of hates both of his characters, or at least specifically the hero character. And that's something he says he's never really felt before, that even his most despicable characters in all his writing he's loved, like a pedophile murderer is one of his favorite characters ever in one of his favorite short stories he's ever written. He was able to empathize with that character. In fact, that's something we see Jack was able to do a lot, empathize with these characters. No matter how despicable, no matter how disgusting, he was able to at least understand where they were coming from, not excuse their behavior, of course. But suddenly, despite empathizing with a literal pedophile that he created, Jack finds he can no longer stand the original hero of his play, Gary Benson. This is the original guy that was supposed to be the hero of the play, and he can't stand him anymore. And it's like, I wonder why that is, Jack.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, we've talked before about the idea that he identified with like the wrong character in a sense. So there's a lot to dig into here, because it's like he's identifying with the other character, but not in a way that's helping him gain clarity on who he is and where he is in his life. It's more just like it's all just based around hating this younger version of himself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, again, he's so close. He's so close to getting it. He's so close to getting what the problem is, but he just can't get over that last little hump. I actually love the writing here. He had become to Jack a kind of simpering goody two-shoes, a postulant before the altar of knowledge rather than a sincere acolyte, an outward paragon of Boy Scout virtues, inwardly cynical, filled not with a real brilliance as he had first been conceived, but only with sly animal cunning. All through the play he unfailingly addressed Denker as Sir, just as Jack had taught his own son to address those older and those in authority as Sir. He thought that Danny used the word quite sincerely, and Gary Benson, as originally conceived, had too. But as he had begun Act 5, it had come more and more strongly to him that Gary was using the word satirically, outwardly straight-faced, while the Gary Benson inside was mugging and leering at Denker. I just love it. I love this idea of, and he does it right here. He compares him to Danny, right? And this is kind of, we're seeing this, it's obviously the George Hatfield of it all, which we'll talk about when he has that dream, but the way in which George Hatfield and Danny are starting to merge into one thing, layered on this whole Gary Benson thing on top of it, are starting to merge into one thing in Jack's mind, is really quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's really just so rich. We've previously discussed these other associations. Jack saw himself as the young Gary. Actually, he's the old Dinker, but now it's like he's realizing that he's the old Dinker, and therefore, he hates Gary, but like simultaneously, Danny's being associated with Gary, so he's by proxy kind of hates Danny.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, George Hatfield is being tossed into this mix here, and young Jack is being like it's this web basically.
Yeah.
It's all it's like this Ouroboros web or some other metaphor that I can't quite find the right association for, but what he really hates is himself, and he's finding this absolutely convoluted Hall of Mirrors way of hating himself without really realizing that that's what's happening.
Yeah. Well, the fascinating part to me is that he has this realization that actually, as the play went on, it seems to me more and more that the miserly old headmaster is actually the hero of the story. And he's aware enough to acknowledge that he's having that feeling, but it's like not quite aware enough to step back and go, hey, wait, doesn't that mean that I'm the bad guy? Hold on. Why am I identifying with the bad guy more? What this guy was designed to be the bad guy, and suddenly I'm seeing him more sympathetic. Doesn't that say something about me? And he can't quite make that mental leap.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think the most fun part to me about what you just read is he's literally reading what he wrote, and he's just reading a different like inflection into what the character that he wrote is saying. And it's like,
yeah,
well, Jack, you wrote the character. Like the intent was what the intent was at the time when you wrote it, and now you're like imputing these evil motives onto the character. Like, that's all you, buddy. That's all happening inside your head. You know that's not on the page, obviously. I mean, I mean, obviously, death of the author and everything, but like this
but
is,
you can't do death of myself.
Yeah, you can't death of yourself when you're the author, right? It's right. Like, I mean, yeah, this is just such a great way of gesturing at the idea that he is changing for the worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So Wendy interrupts the self-loathing session, asking Jack how they're going to get Danny down the mountain. Jack is, at this news, almost absolutely shocked by this whole thing. He's convinced himself that Danny was more like Gary Benson, having just faked the trauma in order to escape punishment, which again, we're tying this character that he hates to Danny. We're kind of seeing, I think, the seeds lay on how a man gets from the person he is to a person that is willing to murder his son, right? We're seeing that the slow baby steps.
Yeah, there's a lot of deranged nonsense from Jack this week, and this is yet more of it. I think we basically agreed last week that week was all about Jack crossing these important lines, and this week he's firmly crossed onto the shithead side of most of the important lines, and now he's just kind of creeping further in the negative direction.
You're so right. It's interesting to me though that King is constantly throwing him a rope. Like he has obviously crossed this threshold. I think we talked about how choosing to lie to his family about what he saw or did not see in 217 was a threshold crossing moment. But he's still every 10 pages, it feels like King is like, here you go, buddy. You make this one choice and everything's going to be okay. Oh, you didn't. Okay. Well, here's another one. You make this one. Oh, okay. Well, okay, I'll do one more. And he just, every single time, Jack bats it aside.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure the hotel is kind of poking and prodding. So
yeah.
So there's that happening. But then also you're right. It's almost like you've got the white on the one hand offering these ways out, and then you've got the, I don't know, the eye of the king on the other side. and it's like you just said, he always ignores the overtures of goodness and possible redemption.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we'll maybe talk about this more when we get to it, but I love this idea of it being the thing where you wake up one morning and say to yourself, today's the day, I'm going to get better. I'm going to do okay. I realize and acknowledge the bad behavior I've been having. in his case, alcohol, but anything else, like I've definitely had things where I woke up in the morning and said, okay, I really need to start to exercise. And then by 1, you're like,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
So like, it's just this, I think that's the same thing that's happening, is like he has these moments of clarity, these moments of, oh my God, I see everything for the way it is now, and I need to do something about it. And then a little time goes by and it's like, well, maybe it's not so important.
Yeah, we're going to see a few iterations of that, at least one iteration of that this week. Yeah.
So the two begin fighting, and I love this moment, Matt, where as they're fighting, Danny starts like tossing and turning in bed. He's still asleep, but perhaps like his brain, his shine is picking up on the negative energy being created by this fight, and it's displaying itself in him physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I interpreted that as basically exactly what you said. He's having nightmares because he's picking up on the conflict. Yeah.
And then, Matt, something weird happens as Wendy is frantically worrying about Danny and how to get them out despite being snowed in, and Jack is explaining why that's impossible or incredibly dangerous. He gets horny. We see this moment where it says one hand found the firm weight of her left breast and he began to stroke it through her shirt. And then that gets Wendy going a little bit. And then we're talking about how Jack would have to snowshoe down 3 days worth of blizzard to get Danny out of here while he's unbuttoning her shirt. And then in the middle of that, fortunately, Wendy is remembering that there's a snowmobile, that they can take that. And it's all happening in the middle of Jack like really trying to get down on his wife here. And there's a lot to talk about here. We obviously have to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to read this bit here, which I think is really important to what my interpretation of going on is here. It says, her own face was slightly flushed, her eyes overbright. Jack's, on the other hand, was calm, as if he'd been reading a rather dull book instead of engaging in foreplay with his wife. So that says a lot, I think. And Jack agrees to go check out the snowmobile in the morning and make sure it runs. And if it does, they'll get Danny out. That sorted, they proceed to do it. They're just getting down. Danny is 3 feet away, sleeping in a cot. But we're just gonna do it.
Yeah.
So Matt, what's fucking going on here? Why is this happening?
Well, for one thing, we can say that The Shining is literature.
Because people are fucking.
Because there's weird sex stuff specifically is what makes something literature. And having sex with your son who was just attacked by a ghost in the room with you is definitely qualifies. What a fascinating scene, though. And what's interesting is it's pretty. It leaves it to you to interpret. This is not one of those moments where Stephen King kind of tells you what to think about the scene that he just wrote. And so maybe you read it different from me, right? Because it's not perfectly clear. But I think that what's happening is basically this is a microcosm of their relationship. Like Jack always wants things to stay the way they are, to not rock the boat, to kind of be in charge, to be the guy who gets to make decisions. And so he tries to say, no, we don't need to do that. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. And he's distracting her, and he distracts her with something pleasant and agreeable in the moment, much like his excuses, booby touching, but much like his excuses in the past. It's basically a distraction. It's just chaff. And for Wendy's part, she really wants to leave, but she lacks the self-assuredness to just be like, no, shut up, we're leaving. And on some level, she's happy to be distracted. And thus she just kind of allows herself to be distracted. And then the can gets kicked down the road and the conversation is over because they both managed to just do it instead of actually finishing the conversation. Neither of them is even like really horny or like wanted this. I think this is just an excuse to not have to talk about this anymore. Yeah,
I pretty much agree with what you said there. I think the thing that really unlocked it for me was that sentence I read to you. That look of Jack's. This has been reading a rather dull book instead of engaging in foreplay with his wife. He's not doing this because he wants it. He's not doing this because like a traumatic event that amped up his testosterone has made him super horny and he really wants to bang his wife right now. He's doing it because it's a distraction. He's doing it because it's a thing that he can do, that he can, try to push the conversation away from the thing he wants. And like it's really interesting because as it goes, Wendy is almost resisting it at first. Like he's trying, like he's slowly unbuttoning and massaging, and she's getting a little into it maybe, but she keeps thinking about the snowmobile and keeps thinking about these other things and is like trying to focus on this stuff. And he's just trying to distract her. And I love what you said about it being a microcosm of their relationship, because I think you're totally right here, because like it is really interesting to me that there is not even a moment where Wendy goes like, hey Jack, our kid is right there. And I don't know, maybe this is just me. I would not feel comfortable getting down in front of my 5-year-old son. I don't know, maybe this is a personal me thing. I don't know, but I would not feel comfortable with that whole arrangement. I would be way too like aware that the kid could wake up at literally any moment and just watch mama and dada going at it.
That's why it makes me feel like there's an almost desperation to be distracted by something, and to not have to keep talking about this, to not have to keep thinking about the weirdness of the situation, to just kind of let it all go away. And even despite the fact that there's obviously that level of awkwardness and weirdness about it.
Because they do, I mean, sort of resolve the issue, right? In that Jack agrees that in the morning he'll go check out the snowmobile, and if he can get it to run, then yes, they will leave. He gives Wendy essentially what she wants, and it is only after that moment that they move on from foreplay to the real thing. But I think if Wendy was a little less distracted, she would probably be able to tell A, that he's like furious and angry, and B, that he's like not really into this at all. And like, I don't know, it just seems like she would be a little bit more aware of the weirdness of the situation, and she's not. Because I think you're right, she wants that distraction. She's creeped out, she's scared, and he's offering her what she wants in all ways, in physically and in the solution to her fear and her problem.
Yeah, I kind of imagine like an earlier draft of the book not having this become a sex scene and just being like a conversation between the two of them in bed with Danny lying there. And I kind of imagine King, looking at what he wrote, this is all in my head obviously, and being like, something's missing here. Like, this is just a conversation. Obviously I should use every opportunity to recapitulate the character traits and conflicts that I want to really hammer in. And then he then he says to himself, well, how can I do that? And then this is I think a great way of doing that.
They could bang. When in doubt, make them bang.
Yeah, that's number one rule of writing. That's how you become a master of literature.
So after, as they sit in bed, Jack waxes philosophically about what could be going on with this hotel, and Danny, he talks about, latent energies, dream interpretations. I think it's important to note here that Jack has no idea what the fuck he's talking about. Like, obviously he's like gleaned some stuff from a book or a newspaper article, or as we would say in 2023, Twitter. And he's decided he knows what all this stuff means and can interpret it. And he goes on to compare Danny's throat wounds to stigmata or self-inflicted wounds. And he just doesn't know any of this stuff. He's just talking out of his ass.
Yeah, he seems unusually full of shit, even for Jack. Definitely there's a vibe of like, he's just kind of saying whatever to get Wendy to calm down. And to kind of like distract and confuse her away from the fundamentally he doesn't want to leave the hotel. So everything that he says has to be read through the light of like, he's not really trying to figure out what's wrong with Danny. He's not really trying to figure out what's going on with the hotel. He's just saying shit so that Wendy will be like, well, I guess it's plausible that he's just having some kind of mental episode that is just going to pass, and then so we don't have to do anything about this, and just talk her down and not have to leave the hotel. That's all.
Yeah, and it works, right? I mean, I think I don't want to be too mean to Wendy, but I totally understand this idea that like she's terrified, right? She's scared. She's scared of her husband. She's scared of what's happening here. She's scared of so many things. And he's sitting here, comforting her and telling her and wielding his intellect in a way that makes it seem like he has this all figured out, and it actually makes sense, and it's the most logical explanation to all this. And he's doing it in this really clever way where he's like not denying or refusing that Danny has some sort of psychic thing, but actually like using that and channeling it into, oh, well, that actually makes sense because he's picking up on latent energies and then creating hallucinations from them. It's really quite diabolically clever, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. And the fact, during this scene in particular, I feel my recollection is that we're not really fully in Jack's point of view. So we don't really know how much of this is just pure conniving versus his genuine thoughts. I may be mistaken here. I'm not really.
Yeah, I wonder if he like. I think that is something that's been true to Jack broadly, is when he is being pretty conniving, I'm not even 100% sure he's aware of it. That he's like that. I'm like, even when like the grabbing of the boobie and everything we just said about his ability, like desire to distract. Like I'm not even 100% confident in saying he was consciously doing that.
Yeah,
like I think that was the end goal. But whether he was aware of that, like consciously, I don't think so. Actually,
I totally agree. Yeah, in fact, I agree with you. Even though I don't think I said anything to that effect in my spiel about that, I don't think that anything that I said was playing out consciously for either of them. I don't think Wendy's sitting there thinking, God, I want to be distracted from this. I don't think Jack's sitting there thinking, at least in that moment, I really want her to stop thinking about this. I think that's just the subconscious level.
And I think it works into your idea of this being a microcosm of their relationship as a whole, because it feels like a thing that like neither person is surprised that this is happening now. In this situation, and so that makes it feel like it's something that's happened probably many times over the course of their marriage.
Oh yeah, I love that. That's a great point.
There's only one small problem, Matt, with this whole argument that he's having here, and that's that he knows it's bullshit because he's seen stuff too, right? He knows that everything he's constructing here is bullshit, or does he? Because I love this writing, actually. Wendy asks him again what he saw, or if he saw anything in 217. And he says here, nothing, he said. And that was true. He had been strung up, not sure of what was happening. He hadn't had the chance to sift through his thoughts for a reasonable explanation concerning the bruises on his son's neck. He had been pretty damn suggestible himself. Hallucinations could sometimes be catching. So this goes back to what we were talking about. Like, is Jack, when Jack comes back and says to Wendy he saw nothing in 217, is he consciously lying? Is he saying, I saw something and I know it was really there? Or is he just entirely convinced that there must have actually been nothing there? And it seems like, at least here, that it's the latter.
Yeah, this is the only shred of anything that makes us still like be able to connect with Jack is that I agree with you that he's not overtly consciously lying and manipulating. He is lying to himself, which is, in a certain sense, even more dangerous than just lying to manipulate, because that makes him unreliable and unpredictable and wishy-washy, basically. But yeah, I agree with what you just said there. He's not aware that he's lying to himself. He's in such a state that this is just his way of dealing with things in general, right? We've harped on this over and over, is that like he narrativizes and rationalizes things to himself so that he can be okay with them. And I think that's just the same mechanism operating again here.
Yeah, no, I agree. Totally. So Wendy eventually falls asleep, but Jack remains awake, thinking and stewing about what happens to him and his family after they go down to the mountain tomorrow. We see here that Jack is actually completely enraged that Wendy hasn't thought about this at all. He's giving himself his own stigmata with his hands as he squeezes his nails so tightly on his palms that he slices into his skin and thinks about what his future would look like. They say no money, no job, no prospects. And the thing I find really fascinating about this is Jack isn't wrong here, right? Like if they were to leave the Overlook tomorrow, they would be in pretty dire straits. Things would be very difficult for them. They would be abandoning a job, kind of like Jack's last hope, actually. But two things really stand out to me here that I want to talk with you about. The first is that Jack's image of his future after coming down isn't one where his family like starves to death because of inability to provide for them. Actually, the future he builds is one where he's able to find a job, able to find work, but he's forced to work to what are to him inferior jobs for little pay. These are remenial jobs, things that are below him, are beneath him, and it's about his pride again. Totally. The other thing I want to talk to you about is that he seems to blame Danny and Wendy entirely for this predicament, that they're having to leave because of Wendy, because of Danny, because of these two. I think he goes so far as to say like, things have been so much better if we didn't even have Danny, if we didn't bring him here, if it was just Wendy and me, it would be fine. And I mean, I guess technically they're leaving because of Danny, but like, whose fault is it that this is your final chance in the first place, Jack? Yeah. Yours. Right. You put them in this situation.
Yeah, right. I mean, you put them in this situation by screwing up so badly that you got fired from all of your other prospects, and then you chose this really rather risky venture. Like the I mean, just on a basic level, like people get hurt. Like it's just risky to say, yeah, we're going to lock ourselves away from civilization for months.
Yeah.
And then he acts shocked and appalled when something actually does go wrong. And it's like, okay, setting aside ghosts and the shine, it's pretty likely that something could have gone wrong with a 5-year-old kid wandering around in a big empty building, right?
Yeah, with like a shitty old boiler and very like completely cut off from civilization. Like Wendy talked about it, just the idea that like right now, if someone got injured and needed a doctor, what would we do?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he views all this through the lens of pride once again. And, Wendy has pricked his pride, which is just totally intolerable. And it just drives him into a rage. And like you said, his thinking here about their lack of prospects and the type of jobs he would have to get, it's not really about family finances. It's all about ego. All of his sort of little fantasy here about having to walk hat in hand and shovel out driveways and so forth. It's all about ego, sense of superiority, and his ability to keep telling this story to himself about how he's so awesome and great and perfect, and he's the football star and he's the genius writer.
Yeah.
And he can't tell that story to himself anymore if he's in that position.
You know what's interesting to me though, thinking about this, that he doesn't look at his current job as beneath him either. And I guess I should rephrase that. I think he does actually, because I think I remember his comparison with Grady, that he called Grady an idiot, and that's why. I think that he has this idea that like the only reason this kind of work is tolerable is because it provides me with time to work on my real profession, which is writing.
Yeah.
And so he sees it like he's tolerating this kind of work to be a hotel caretaker because of that. And I don't know, just that thought occurred to me as we were talking about this.
No, you're right. He's conceptualized this as basically a sabbatical, and not actually a job that he's taking out of desperation.
Yeah, because it's by its very nature seasonal, right? And I don't think he had any plan to come back another season after this. This was just a thing to get them through the winter, kind of, and then he was going to move on to different and better things.
Right. I think you're right.
So in the middle of all this thinking and rage, a thought pops into his head. Just a small one, Matt. No big deal. Kill her. The thought rose up from nowhere, naked and unadorned. The urge to tumble her out of bed, naked, bewildered, just beginning to wake up, to pounce on her, seize her neck like the green limb of a young aspen, and to throttle her, thumbs on windpipe, fingers pressing against the top of her spine, jerking her head up and ramming it back down against the floorboards, again and again, whamming, whacking, smashing, crashing, jitter and jive, baby, shake, rattle, and roll. He would make her take her medicine, every drop, every last bitter drop. So I did not enjoy reading that, but I think it's one thing, I think, to have this random thought pop into your head while you're frustrated with your partner of just kill her. But it's not just like that thought is the one that pops into his head, but then he builds on it outside the parenthetical. Like you can maybe, in my mind, you can make the argument that, and I think the book is making this argument, that about 50% of the time, the parenthetical thoughts that pop into our characters' heads are coming external to them. You know, they are not their thoughts. This is the Overlook kind of fucking with them. And you could make the argument that in this moment, this parenthetical here is the Overlook dropping this thought into his head. But everything else, Matt, the detail in which Jack proceeds to describe and imagine murdering his wife, that's all him, man. That's all him.
Yeah, it's just showing this deep wellspring of rage and loathing that he does feel toward her, which is really interesting because, like, man, this is one of these things I want to say really carefully, and I'm probably not going to say exactly right, but like, I think he still loves his wife. I think he just also like resents her enormously and borderline hates her at the same exact time. Like, I think there's sort of two Jacks in there is one way you can say it.
Love is a weird thing, man. It doesn't like it's complicated and messy, and I agree with you. I'm not saying that like that makes it okay, but like it's this complicated, messy thing. I think he does, but he also hates her for sure.
Yeah, there's like little 6-year-old Jack who is pure and innocent, and then there's traumatized, abused, you know, wrathful, pride-ridden Jack, and unfortunately these two psyches are the same person, because that's what a person is. That's like, I think that I don't think we're wrong in saying that this is the sort of thing that King is actually interested in talking about, and this is something that I haven't mentioned yet, but I've often thought about the idea that King was really frustrated with Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining, and it was basically because Kubrick just decided to make Jack a monster. And here Jack is being a monster, and this is surprising me a little bit, honestly, because I was like, oh, I really expected Jack to be a lot more likable, considering the fact that I knew that King was frustrated with Kubrick. But no, Jack is actually a giant asshole, but there's complexity to it. There's a layering of, well, a person can be a giant asshole and still have like that inner child that was abused, and like it's a mess, right? It's hard to untangle, and that's kind of why it's so delightful to talk about and think about.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And one of the things, I don't know if we've said this publicly yet, but one of the things we are going to do when we finish this book is we are going to go back and watch Kubrick's The Shining, and we're going to do an episode talking about our view on that movie in the lens of now reading this book. And I agree with you. I think, you know, as I'm going through this thing, obviously, you know, we have a book to finish, and there's going to be more twists and turns in the story as we go. But right now you're looking at it and like, I kind of understand why Kubrick looked at this book and made that version of the character. Like, I get it. And I do think he's more complicated than that. I do understand why King was not as big of a fan of that interpretation, but I see it and I get it, especially with moments like this. Like, I totally understand reading that book and going, okay, here's what I think this guy is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's only Matt seeing Danny thrash in his sleep again that manages to calm Jack down and brings him back to his senses. He says, I'm being stupid. All that matters is Danny's safety. All that matters is him. And so we should leave tomorrow. We should get out of this place. But as he falls asleep, he can't help but think everything would be better if they just could stick it out. And he kind of shifts from realization to rationalization very quickly, because he moves from that to, if we stayed here, you know, everything would be great. And I'd finish the play. And then I'd get rehired in Stovington. And yeah, I mean, I didn't like my time there. I, in fact, earlier in this book, blamed it for my alcoholism. But now that I'm not drinking, it wouldn't be so bad. It was mostly the hangover that made me miserable at this job. Actually, it wouldn't be that way again. He says he would be able to handle his responsibilities much better. He was sure of it. And it is just fascinating watching, like, he goes from monster to realization to rationalization in like 45 seconds. It's incredible.
Yeah. We said this earlier that he goes through these iterations, these like loops several times this week where there's a moment that is the only element of like the pull that's left between the push and pull cycle, is where you're like, oh, wait, here's a moment of clarity. Okay. He's no, he lost it.
There it goes out the window. Yep.
Yeah. But this specifically made me think about how much of Jack's, mental processing has to do with this delusion that everything will be fine if we just keep things the way they are, which I think is a pretty common human thing. Like it's a common, especially in like family and relationship situations, it's very common to feel like, no, like don't change things. You'll mess everything up. Which is usually like maladaptive, because the truth is that the world is always changing and people are always changing. Everything's always changing. There is no keeping things the way they are. This is just another cope of his, is to say like everything will be fine if we just keep things the way they are. That's been a refrain throughout his thinking, I would say.
And you're absolutely right. That's impossible. Even if his thing is imagined perfectly, like life in Stovington will not be the way it was. Just it will not, for sure.
I mean, one thing that's been on my mind, partially because of this book, partially because I have children, is like, even if you keep everything as the same as you possibly can, your children grow up.
They're changing constantly. Danny is a completely different person than he was a year ago.
Exactly. And little Danny will really cease to be little Danny, in the blink of an eye. And then suddenly it's, young Daniel and you have to deal with things you didn't have to deal with before.
So suddenly Jack wakes up in a dream, standing in the bathroom of 217. In the tub this time is not the old woman, but George Hatfield himself, dead with a knife in his chest, and he's come to kill Jack. I find this dream, I really like this entire dream sequence. We've talked about dream sequences before in our King reading and how King uses them in interesting ways. There are moments where you feel like a dream sequence is a bit of a cheat, because it just allows you to do things that you couldn't normally do in the scope of your story. But I really like this one a whole lot.
Yeah, I liked how it was used here, right? And this is one where, I mean, there's probably some hotel involvement, but it could. I'm not really coming down hard one way or the other. It's just that I felt like it could have just been a nightmare.
No, you're totally right.
Yeah.
So Jack escapes from George, who insists he doesn't stutter, and finds himself back down in the basement of the Overlook, screaming about how he'll find it, which is, by the way, a perfect recreation of the planned climax of his play, right? That is one thing that the old headmaster is frantically looking around, searching for something. I think the proof of Gary's cheating is what he's looking for. I don't quite remember it, but what he does find is a wasp's nest and a timer attached to some dynamite.
Yes. I mean, I guess that's a, symbol of the upcoming explosion. I wonder if you have any interpretation beyond that possibility.
I'm not sure, because what I love is his reaction to it, because his relief became absolute triumph. He had done more than escape George. He had conquered. With these talismanic objects in his hands, George would never touch him again. George would flee in terror. And I mean, obviously the timer represents the timer that he moved forward, right? And then of course the wasp nest is the nest he found, which I mean, I don't know, like when you think of the wasp nest and its function in the story, this was this thing that he defeated, right? This idea that he was striking back against the wasps of his life and defeating them. But of course he was wrong about that, because the nest was not dead. It comes back and hurts the people he cares about. And so once again, it seems like he thinks the nest is here for him, is a representation of his power. And it's not.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. This is that it was in fact only because of his actions that the wasp nest hurt his family. The other interesting thing about the dream that I don't really know what to make of it, but I'll just bring it out here, see if you have any thoughts, is that George keeps saying, "I don't stutter."
Yeah.
And I was like, are we supposed to take that literally? Like, did George Hatfield actually not stutter, and this is a confabulation of Jack's? I don't think that's or meant to take from this. So I don't quite know what to make of that.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much detail here, but I think it is a really interesting line of questioning, right? Because, one of the things I think you guessed at the time of the stuttering incident is that Jack had some stuttering in his past, and this was activating some insecurities of his past. I think you speculated that perhaps with his father and his father's reaction to his stuttering, we've had several flashbacks to young Jack. We haven't seen anything like that at this point. So we don't know, but I do agree with you. Like, I think George's insistence that he doesn't stutter, which for all we know is just wrong, is incorrect, but again, the story was told from the perspective of Jack. And so, I mean, it's interesting that George does not stutter in this scene, right? There's no stuttering George Hadfield in this moment. So I don't know.
I mean, maybe Jack is the one who in some future scenario is going to deny stuttering. Like I mean, obviously George is a projection of Jack. Even in this dream context, George is a projection of Jack. So it's sort of Jack saying, "I don't stutter," is one way you could read that. Insisting that he doesn't stutter, which is a little bit of a protesting too much situation.
I like it. So suddenly the timer that was previously connected to a bomb is not anymore. Instead is connected to a black cane that looks remarkably like his father's. And as Jack picks it up and starts beating George Hadfield to death with it, it turns into not a cane, but a roque mallet. That's another little bit of interesting image for you there.
Yeah.
But here's how the chapter ends, Matt. He brought the mallet back for a final whistling downstroke, and it was fully launched before he saw the supplicating face below him was not George's, but Danny's. It was the face of his son. Daddy. And then the mallet crashed home, striking Danny right between the eyes, closing them forever. And something somewhere seemed to be laughing. No. This really fucked me up, actually. Like, just imagining doing something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, like I said earlier, this is a chapter that forces you to visualize things a lot, this whole section really. And there's something viscerally upsetting about imagining some of these specific things.
Yeah. All right, so from here we move to chapter 33, The Snowmobile. It is the next morning and Jack finds himself in the equipment shed checking out the state of that very snowmobile. But first he creepily picks up a roque mallet and swings it through the air, most of the details of the previous night's dream apparently forgotten.
Well, that's good, I guess.
I love the writing here, though. Quite a game. Schizo, in parenthetical. He frowned a little, then smiled. Yes, it was a schizo sort of game at that. The mallet expressed that perfectly. A soft end and a hard end. A game of finesse and aim and a game of raw bludgeoning power.
Oh, you're doing fine, Jackie boy. Just stay the course. You'll be fine.
Yeah, it's the game that's schizo. It's just the game.
Yeah,
a soft end and a hard end. A game of a soft end and a hard end is Jack, right? I think you were talking about the two different versions of Jack that exist. I think that's it right there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's wow. That's I'm a little bit baffled actually, because that's even more. That's fantastic actually, because his character has the push and pull elements built into it, like at the level of designing who this character is from the ground up. And on the one hand, it repels us and it attracts us, but he is a bit schizo at that.
And it leads you to wonder, like we talked about this at the very beginning. I think I asked you the question, why roque, right? Why not croquet? And maybe it was at some core character building moment in King's creation, he saw a roque mallet and became fascinated by this idea that it has both ends of the, like a croquet mallet is the same on both sides, right? That's what it is. This is designed differently. It is a hard end for power shots and a softer end for more focused, targeted, aimed shots. And he goes, wow, the duality of this thing is really interesting to me, and it's this perfect metaphor for my character, and he just builds it in. I don't totally see that happening.
That's great. That is great. Yeah, I now just believe that is correct, and that's why it's Roke in this book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then Jack eyes the snowmobile, which he describes perfectly as a monstrous mechanized wasp. I love that so much. Mm-hmm. It's so good. And I love this chapter. This is the interesting thing about this chapter is this is another King chapter where, it's 20 pages long basically. And it's basically 20 pages to just plot wise say, Jack decided to throw the magneto of the car away, making the snowmobile useless and trapping them there, right? That's it. That's what happens. But what we actually get in practice is 20 arduous, painful pages as this man struggles with the two sides of himself, trying to come to the right decision, trying to come to the decision, the kind moral decision, but ultimately failing himself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think also failing in a way that the Jack of maybe 2 weeks ago wouldn't have failed. And by 2 weeks ago, I mean 2 weeks of reading, I guess, not 2 weeks of his time. But
sure.
Point being, there's been enough slippage inside him that certain kinds of bald dishonesty are now on the table. He's crossed all of these lines. We just talked about how he probably wasn't, willfully and mindfully deceiving Wendy earlier, but this is him talking himself into the idea of, I'm just gonna lie. And it's gonna be a fully cognizant lie, but it's for the best. It's for the greater good or whatever. And it's much harder to kind of walk back from that kind of thing. Like there's some level of outward plausible deniability, but he no longer has that inward plausible deniability. Like he knows that he's lying. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it is really interesting how he struggles with that, right? Because, for one brief moment as he's searching, he thinks he can't find the battery. And he's like, oh, good. My decision's made for me. I can't find the battery. There's no battery. Well, we're stuck here now. And then he spies the box that has the battery in it. And he's like, oh, fuck. And then for a brief moment, he's just like, well, no, I'll just pretend like I didn't find the battery. But he can't do that either. And it is really interesting that, like, you're absolutely right. His narratives are so important to him. This construction of what the truth is so important to him that it really attacks him at his core when he just has to outright lie. That is not something that's easy for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's unnatural for him to do that. It's not really in keeping with his character. He's not the kind of person who does that, but he's becoming the kind of person who does that.
Yeah. I love this line here, and we need to talk about this a bit. God damn it, it just wasn't fair. Something luck, fate, providence had been trying to save him. Some other luck, white luck. And at the last moment, bad old Jack Torrance luck had stepped back in. The lousy run of cards wasn't over yet. Resentment, a gray sullen wave of it pushed up his throat. His hand had clenched into fists again. So obviously the thing to talk about here is we see a tangential reference to the white. A little bit here, right? White luck.
Yeah, very sort of used unconventionally too. But yes, definitely. This idea, I almost wonder, I forget where this book falls in the continuum, but like, I'm just in my head trying to think back and forth whether like is King referencing his greater conception of the white, or is this more of a colloquial, just casual reference to like white as goodness?
Yeah. I mean, it's post Salem's Lot, where if you will remember, the white was specifically referenced and summoned there in their fight against the vampires. So that exists in his mind somehow. Now, whether he is consciously channeling that here, I don't know. I do think it's really interesting because it is, as you said, kind of an unconventional, like it's not what we would typically call the power of the white, right? He's saying here that like the white luck is trying to help him by making it so he can't find the battery box and keeping him here. He's saying that being here is the lucky thing, that being here is the thing that the good luck is providing him, but his bad luck is the thing that's going to get him to have to leave. And I mean, I think in reality, it's the exact opposite, right?
Yeah, he's got it exactly backwards. And in fact, if we take it literally, the white luck was the one that led his eyes to fall upon the box with the the Magneto in it.
Yep.
But he rejects it. Once again, like you pointed out earlier, he keeps being offered these outs and he keeps rejecting them.
And here's another one, right? He sees the box and he's walking out of the shed deciding that he's gonna lie and just never say he never saw the battery. But as he walks out of the shed, he sees his son over there playing. And once again, just like the previous night where he kind of calmed himself down from his rage by seeing his son, here he sees Danny again, and it's like a light goes off in his head. It says, in that instant, kneeling there, everything came clear to him. It was not just Danny the Overlook was working on. It was working on him, too. It wasn't Danny who was the weak link. It was him. He was the vulnerable one, the one who could be bent and twisted until something snapped, until I let go and go to sleep. And when I do, if I do that. He looked up at the banks of the windows and the sun threw back an almost blinding glare from their many paned surfaces, but he looked anyway. For the first time, he noticed how many of them seemed like eyes. They reflected away the sun and held their own darkness within. It was not Danny they were looking at. It was him. So, like, this is like, fuck yeah, you did it. You did it.
Yeah. The book's over. You got the means of escape in your hand.
Yeah.
God. Yeah. I mean, again, right? Like, there's not a lot of stuff in these pages that makes us feel warmly towards Jack. But here we do get this brief moment of clarity. Once again, the moment of clarity is brought on by looking at his son, who he loves and adores. This kind of purity, the purity of his love for his son is like a magic spell that just banishes the Overlook from his brain.
Yeah.
But then, like 15 seconds later, the spell creeps back over him.
Yeah.
It makes it worse in a sense.
I love this because man, this part as well. Now kneeling in the sun and watching his son playing in the shadow of the hotel, he knew that it was all true. The hotel wanted Danny, maybe all of them, but Danny for sure. The Hedges had really walked. There was a dead woman in 217, a woman that was perhaps only a spirit and harmless under most circumstances, but a woman who was now an active danger, like some malevolent clockwork toy. She had been wound up and set into motion by Danny's own odd mind. And his own. So that's a pretty good revelation there, right? That I think we had kind of been avoiding talking about this central idea that the idea that the Overlook was just pictures in a book and couldn't hurt you perhaps was true for Dick Halloran, and that's why he said it and he meant it. But the introduction of Danny, and as Jack hypothesizes here, the introduction of himself is feeding the hotel in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and more than you're right, hypothesizes, but it's almost like the book is just telling us, like, yep, this is how it is. This is You don't need to like wonder about this anymore.
Yeah, but that's like, it's great. Like, you've unlocked the puzzle. You've won the prize, Jack. You did it. You have all the information you need now. Now it's time to get the fuck out of here, because you know it all and you've accepted it all. And as you said, book over. We did it, right? Mm-hmm. But no, it's not, because as he walks out, everything seems to fall apart. Like I love this. I compare this in my mind to like watching a plane like struggling to take off, and it finally gets enough lift to just get up there, and it's like, yes, it's going, and then it just like stalls at the zenith of its climb and just crashes back down, and it's like, it's almost more heartbreaking that it almost got out,
Yeah, no, you're right. It makes it even worse that he seemed to be on the right track for a minute there.
Yeah, and then suddenly he's not, because he said it had all been right until he had seen Danny playing in the snow. It was Danny's fault. Everything had been Danny's fault. He was the one with the shining, or whatever it was. It wasn't a shining, it was a curse. If he and Wendy were here alone, they could have passed the winter quite nicely. No pain, no strain on the brain. Don't want to leave? Can't? The Overlook didn't want them to go, and he didn't want them to go either, not even Danny. Maybe he was a part of it now. Perhaps the Overlook, large and rambling Samuel Johnson that it was, had picked him to be its Boswell. You say the new caretaker writes? Very good. Sign him on. It's just, it's insane, man.
Yeah,
it's insanity. What's happening here is literal insanity.
I mean, I honestly don't even like follow his train of thought here. It's like genuinely rambling and incoherent. And at this point, it is so overt that I do feel like this is one of the rare times when I'm like, I do feel like saying this is the hotel kind of stepping in.
Yeah, you do feel the pressure of it, don't you?
Yeah, because especially the contrast between the like absolute clarity and certainty of the previous moment.
Mm-hmm. And you wonder how it happens. Like, why give him that moment of clarity? Is it just that these moments of Danny powered clarity only last a certain amount of time, and then it falters to what's been going on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's in keeping with the greater Stephen King theme of like, you're always going to be given a choice. You're going to be given temptation, and you're going to be given grace, but ultimately you're going to be given a choice. And the white or whatever can't just solve this problem for him. It can clear his mind enough for him to think clearly for a moment, but he can't make the choice to take the correct action based on that, and he just opens himself up to the further influence of the negative forces.
Sure. The one thing I really like is tying back to your central theme of pride, being Jack's fatal flaw here. The idea that one of the things that he convinces himself of is this idea that, oh, maybe the Overlook like picked me special, that like this isn't a remedial caretaker job, this is the most important job in the world, and that it wants me specifically because of my writing power, because the Overlook wants its story told, and so it picked me to be the caretaker. It's self-inflating and egotism that it's perfect Jack. Like, it's perfect Jack.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I mean, you could argue, like, if we are going to interpret this as being, the voice of the hotel in his head, it's flattering him. It's saying like, yeah, you have the capacity to be, someone who is remembered for his writing on, on me, the hotel.
Yeah. The thing I like the most, though, and the thing that I think finally allows Jack to make the decision, is just deliciously twisted, because Jack somehow manages to twist this whole conversation down, this whole choice that he has right here, down to the simple decision of staying on the wagon or off, right? He twists it to, if they leave now, if they go to Sidewinder now, how long before I end up in the bar drinking? Hours, days. It will 100% happen. So I cannot do that. And so he's managed to make this selfish choice into actually what's the best for him, because of like the idea that, well, if I stay here, I definitely won't drink, so it's fine. It's so twisted and evil. I love it. I love it, actually. It's just this perfect way of coming up with a reason for making a choice you're about to make, that you can live with.
Yep. Delightful mealy mouthed excuse. Just really hate this guy right now.
And with that, he reaches over, grabs the Magneto out of the machine, and chucks it out into the wilderness. And I love this part, Matt. It went much further than it should have, which intriguing, is that not?
Yeah. Just a little magical nudge.
So yeah, there's something that pushes this a little bit further here, a little bit. And so our chapter ends with Jack, after damning his son, he goes and just has a good old snowball fight with him, because father son, yay.
Yeah, man. That was just the most delightfully awful way to end this, where he's doomed them all basically, and now he's like, now let's go play. Yeah, sucks.
So here we move on to chapter 34, titled The Hedges. We pick up days later. Thanksgiving has come and gone, and an uneasy truce has descended upon the Overlook. Danny knows which places are safe and which aren't, and so he's staying in the safe places. Jack is apparently working on the play again, and we learn it's almost done. And everything seems okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, I mean, boiling under the surface.
Yeah.
There's no specific point of argument that's out in the open, because leaving is not an option. So there's just low-grade fear. Yeah.
And the interesting thing here is that Danny knows his father is something's bothering him, and he's keeping something from him, but not what. It says, his father was guarding that carefully, even in his own mind. Was it possible, Danny wondered, to be glad you had done something and still be so ashamed of that something that you tried not to think of it? The question was a disturbing one. The answer is more disturbing, Danny, which is, yes, welcome to adults.
Yeah. Yeah. Asking questions no 5-year-old should have to ask.
Yeah, it's so tragic in that he's having to learn this hard truth of humans and our constant self-contradiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially Jack, but yes, I guess you're right.
Yeah. No, specifically Jack, but broadly, I think people do stuff like this all the time, right?
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Danny is heading outside to go play, and at the last minute, he makes the horrible decision to go to the playground instead of his usual spot in the rear of the Overlook. He goes to the cement rings first, and partially buried in the snow, climbs into one. And here we get some creepy shit here, Matt. I really enjoy the writing here, though. How you King once again, I think, captures childhood really perfectly. How you kind of get swept up into this game of make believe and don't actually notice how scary of a situation you've just put yourself in until that make believe game ends or concludes, and then you're just like, oh, now I'm in this spooky tunnel actually, and suddenly I'm terrified.
Yeah, just kind of swept up in the imagination of it all. Yeah.
And so as Danny tries to exit the tunnel, the snow shifts and he finds himself trapped in complete darkness. But worse, Matt, something is in here with me. And oh my God, this is one of those moments that just scared the shit out of me the first time I read it. Once again, Matt, King doesn't have us see anything, right? There's nothing we see. There's just, once again, sound, the crackle of the dead leaves at the far end of the tunnel as Danny tries to dig his way out, as the thing in there moves towards him. And we never see it. We never see what it is. We just get this little hint that Danny thinks he sees something at the very end of the scene.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Yeah. I mean, it could be like a, possum for all we know, right?
Yeah. It could be nothing. It could be nothing.
Yeah. It could, despite the fact that the hedge animals are, real, this could just be his imagination.
Yeah. So Danny escapes the tunnel, and as he runs away, while he's catching his breath and keeping an eye on the entrance to the tunnel, he hears a thump behind him. And it's snow, Matt, falling off the hedge animals. Danny begins to move out of the playground, and as the animals begin to move with him, we get more thumps as the snow falls away. I love this whole thing so much. It's so creepy and wonderful. I love the conceit that we're sticking with, that the hedge animals only move when he's not looking. It's so great to me because it's not necessary, right? It's like he knows they're moving, they know he knows they're moving, but it's all part of the game, right? And there's this idea that they're only coming when he looks away, and they're getting closer and closer and closer and closer, and he can't move fast enough, but it's only when you look away. It's just perfect.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's masterfully written. You really feel Danny's fear here, and I agree. I mean, what you just said, I think, is really interesting because, like, it really is about that fear. It seems at this point like the hotel is very interested in stoking this terror, not so much in just killing him. I mean, we kind of sort of know this because the woman in 217 had her hands around his throat, and then suddenly he's just walking around with some bruises on his neck, but he's basically fine.
Yeah.
And yet again here, he was like surrounded by these, giant monsters basically, but he gets away with just a little scratch on his leg. It's like, well, that makes sense if the hotel is mainly interested in just scaring the shit out of him.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of beg the question, like, what does the hotel want? Because, if it is, as Jack predicted here, that Danny is a battery that's powering the stuff that's happening in here, it seems like they'd want him alive, not dead, to keep that battery going.
Yeah. Well, maybe they feed on his fear. I don't know.
But again, we're personifying an entity as if it's one unit. Like this could be several different units all working kind of independently. We just don't know. Don't know.
That's something I was thinking about, because I was like, well, maybe the hedge animals are like their own thing, and they just wanted to kill him.
They just wanted to eat this kid.
Yeah. And I think it's actually to the book's benefit that we don't really know.
I agree.
Because it could have, that allows us to feel the proper degree of anxiety for Danny here.
Totally. So like you said, Danny breaks into a sprint and at the very last minute makes it to the porch of the Overlook, which apparently the hedge animals can't get to. He still gets a good scratch from the lead lion on his leg, but as his parents come to help him, all the animals are back where they were and all snow covered again, which is just the final fuck you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So from here we move to chapter 35, the lobby. This picks up right where the last one left off, with the parents carrying their son to the lobby where he tells them what happened to him out there. Jack immediately dismisses the hedge animals, cross-examining Danny and saying he must have scratched his leg on the crust of the snow. And I love, Matt, how Danny responds to this here. How kind of adult he sounds here. It's like, Daddy. What, Dan? I didn't cut my leg on the crust. There isn't any crust. It's all powdery snow. It won't even stick together to make snowballs. Like, he's just like, he's not holding back. He's just like, Dad, no. Like, that's not what happened. You are incorrect.
Yeah, well, that's the saddest part of this scene, is that he trusts his father enough to be like, surely if I just explain this reasonably to my father, who is always right and is so big and strong and smart, he will understand. But like, as we see, it's, if anything, he learns the opposite from this interaction.
Yeah, because he also realizes something else in this moment, that his dad knows that he's telling the truth because he's seen the animals too, and before he can say that out loud, Jack slaps Danny across the face, which is, the first act of real violence we've seen from Jack in this book so far. We had the arm incident and the George Hatfield incident, but those all occurred prior to the start of the story, and this is the first one in the story proper. So it's a big line we've just crossed here.
Yeah. Really piling on the stuff that makes us hate Jack here.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the first but not the last act of low-key, well, yeah, in any key of domestic violence, I guess, is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working our way past more and more of these red lines, that I guess the point here is that once he's crossed this line, it's very easy to cross it again.
Yep. So Wendy grabs Danny and Jack grabs Danny, and for a brief moment, both parents are pulling their son in different directions. A perfect image for their current marriage situation. Danny caught in the middle of it all, and he just screams, "Let go of me."
Love it.
Hate it. Good. Hate it. Yeah, absolutely hate it, but love it for this book.
Yeah.
So in the aftermath of the hit, Jack seems a little shell-shocked, right, Matt? He knows that he promised he'd never lay a hand on Danny, and he knows that he failed on that promise. And this isn't the type of thing you can rationalize away, right? This isn't the type of thing that you can say, well, you hit him. You hit him. You said you were never going to hit him, and you just hit him. And so he can't really deal with this very well.
He can't deal with it internally or externally, which messes up his ability to tell himself these stories, which I think is why we see the rapid deterioration in the next chapter and a half.
Yep. I love this part right here. All right, it's over. And when the ranger comes to check on us, we'll tell him we all want to go down. All right? All right, Jack said. And at that moment, at least, he meant it. The same way he had always meant it on the mornings after, looking at his pale and haggard face in the bathroom mirror. I'm going to stop, cut it off flat. But morning gave way to afternoon. This is what we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. This idea that, you have strong, ideas and ability at one point, and that fades over time. And so I love this idea that when he said all right, he legitimately meant it. He was not lying to himself. He, at that very moment, in the aftermath of striking his son, he meant it.
Yeah. And every New Year's, when I resolve to do this long list of things, I really, really mean it.
I do really like this part where Jack says, he wants Wendy to ask him about the hedge animals. Like, if she asks him what Danny was talking about, he would tell the truth. He would tell her everything. So there again, this duality of him, that there is a part of him that's very eager to be honest and tell the truth here, but only when pushed on it.
Well, only when pushed on it, and also only when he's in the right mental state, because as we've seen, his mood swings so wildly. Like, this sort of desperation to be honest and come clean, and this is likely to just give way to this rageful, prideful seething within 15 minutes. And if she were to ask him about the hedge animals when he was in that state, who knows what could happen? I mean, we know exactly what would happen is he would get mad and tell her, oh, you think I'm lying,
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
No, you're right. You're right. So from here, we move to chapter 36, The Elevator. Later that same night, the Torrances wake up to a strange sound booming around the hotel. They quickly realize it's the old spooky elevator running on its own. Jack assumes it's just an electric short and goes to check on it. And this time, Danny and Wendy go with him. Wendy doesn't say why she's so insistent on this, but I really like this, Matt. I think, it's at least partially I'm scared and don't want to be alone, but I do think it is a little bit of I want to go see what you're going to see this time. And if there's something there, I will either see it or not see it too. Yeah. I don't trust you anymore.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think it's at least half of that, right? Mm-hmm. That she doesn't trust him to give an accurate report anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So they follow behind him. And I just wanted to read this because I love this image. In his faded tartan bathrobe and brown leather slippers with the rundown heels, his hair all in sleep corkscrews and alfalfa cowlicks, he looked to her like an absurd 20th century Hamlet, an indecisive figure so mesmerized by onrushing tragedy that he was hopeless to divert its course or alter it in any way. You're really laying all your cards down on the table here with this, Stephen.
Yeah, no, that's pretty funny. You're right. That's great. I didn't really think of it that way, but yeah, that's great.
So the three stand in front of the elevator, and as they listen to it run its course going up and down, Wendy's mind is suddenly invaded by thoughts of a party and images and memories of what it must have been like to be in that party. Danny, we see, is hearing and experiencing them too, but not Jack, though. Jack says all he can hear is the noises of the elevator, and he's probably definitely pretty much certainly telling the truth, right?
Totally. I'm not even sure if he expects them to believe him at this point. Like, I think that's the next step in his degradation is him realizing that they're aware of how much he has been lying, and then that's like you can just predict like clockwork how that's going to play out. Is like he's not going to be like, oh wow, I should really take responsibility. I really screwed up here. It's just going to make him even madder to be like, well, they're disrespecting me. They don't understand the pressures that I've been put under by the responsibility of.
Yeah,
they don't understand. That's so. And then there's going to be kind of almost nowhere left to go. It's just going to be the trust is broken.
Yeah.
The faith is broken. The katet is, I think, already broken. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's bad stuff.
Bad stuff. You're totally right. So Jack smashes the emergency glass elevator and removes the elevator key, using it to stop the elevator on their floor. When Wendy tries to stop him from doing this, he throws him her to the ground, which is our second act of violence here.
Yeah, and this one even more just like casual and not seemingly regretted. Also, by the way, he just like punches the glass plate.
Yeah.
Just like that Ryan Gosling in The Nice Guys when he punches his hand through the glass window and cuts his
so much
vein and blood just everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. He should have gone and got the roque mallet and opened it that way.
That would have been better. It would have been better to involve the roque mallet in this tableau somehow. Yeah.
I do like this moment where it says he turned back to Wendy and Danny for a moment. She was sitting up and Danny had his arm around her. They were staring at him carefully, as if he was a stranger they had never seen before, possibly a dangerous one. He opened his mouth, not sure what was going to come out. And what does come out is I'm just doing my job. Yeah. It's not even a good excuse anymore.
Yeah, it's so pathetic.
But it is this perfect image of it has now become the two of them. It is not the Torrances anymore. As you said, the katet is broken. It is now the two of them and Jack, and they are on different teams now.
Yeah, you're right. Definitely. That's I'm kind of a broken record in terms of the idea that we're crossing lines that can't be come back from. But I feel like this is a sort of final one. It's like I don't really see the way out from here. I see the slide downhill from here very easily.
Yeah, definitely. So Jack stops the elevator, opens the door, and inspects it. It's empty, Matt. There's nothing in there. It was just clearly a short circuit. But as you said, there's no more trust in this relationship anymore. Wendy is not taking what he's saying on faith, and so she pushes past him, climbs up into the elevator, and sees this. What about this, Jack? Is this a short circuit? She threw something, and suddenly the hall was full of drifting confetti, red, white, and blue and yellow. Is this a green party streamer faded to a pale pastel color with age? And this, she tossed it out, and it came to rest on the blue-black jungle carpet, a black silk cat's eye mask, dusted with sequins at the temples. Does that look like a short circuit to you, Jack? She screamed at him. So, I mean, surely Jack saw all these things in the elevator, right? And just decided in that moment that he's just going to say, nope, nothing. Close.
The most I'll be willing to stretch out some grace to him is to say maybe he was just like, oh shit, I'm hallucinating again.
Yeah.
And not realizing like, no, it's really there, which he really, I don't even really want to grant him that because he really should know by this point.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So this is big because this is, I think, we've had Jack see things, we've had Danny see things. This is the first time Wendy has experienced something supernatural. It's here.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I want to, just look at what it actually is too, because
sure,
as an element of horror, it's such a fascinating choice for really the first physical evidence that they all can kind of see and touch and agree on of ghosts is party favors. It's confetti. It's it couldn't be any less creepy in a sense than party favors. But like somehow that very discrepancy, that jarring weirdness, magnifies the oddness of it. Like if you find a bloody glove in the elevator, at least you know what kind of book you're in.
Sure.
But a cat's eye mask from a masked ball, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I mean, it just ties into this idea that the ghosts are just fucking with them. Like, why is this happening tonight here? Because like this idea, and we'll see in the next chapter, Danny says like this idea that like the party never stops. Time is meaningless at the Overlook. The people that lived here and died here are just here forever and constantly running through their thing. But this is the first time this has happened. This particular thing has happened. And so it seems like we're just fucking with y'all, man.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think you're right.
All right, so we move to our final chapter of the week, chapter 37, the ballroom. It is now the morning of December 1st. Danny is standing in the ballroom looking at a giant clock on the mantle, and I love this writing so much. He supposed that the clock was one of the things he wasn't supposed to touch, like the decorative fire tools in their brass-bound cabinet by the lobby fireplace or the tall china highboy at the back of the dining room. A sense of injustice and a feeling of angry rebellion suddenly rose in him, and never mind what I'm not supposed to touch. Just never mind. Touched me, hasn't it? Played with me, hasn't it? It had. And it hadn't been particularly careful not to break him either. There's a lot of Jack in that, isn't there?
Yeah, I totally agree. Definitely this tone reminds us of Jack. Mm-hmm. I want to be careful actually to, as Jack deteriorates, I want to be careful with these associations between Jack and Danny because getting angry about being treated like shit is actually pretty reasonable, behavior. The difference between Jack and Danny is that Danny is in fact a small child who has been, treated poorly. Yeah. And Jack is a grown man who is behaving and thinking like a whiny little baby.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right there.
I mean, in my experience, even literal whiny little babies are at least genuinely experiencing some kind of distress when they behave that way. Whereas, Jack is just
no excuses for Jack. Yeah,
no excuses.
So Danny winds the clock and then moves the minute hand to the hour to see what it does when it hits, and has this realization, which I think just hits another beat that we had from Jack's side. It says, in the Overlook, all things had a sort of life. It was as if the whole place had been wound up with the silver key. The clock was running. The clock was running. He was that key, Danny thought sadly. Tony had warned him, and he'd just let things go on. I'm just 5, he cried to some half-felt presence in the room. Doesn't it make any difference that I'm just 5? There was no answer. I love all that. I love it so much.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting that King kind of tells us this information about the nature of the hotel and the nature of Danny's role in it, via these sort of flashes of insight that Danny and Jack separately actually obtain. and it's not really treated as a big reveal. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, this is what's happening, if you were wondering.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is. I don't think like it's one of those things that like when we talked about the Dark Tower, we talked a lot about this the rules of the world, right? The rules of magic and the rule like how all this works. And we talked about how actually that King is not great at that kind of specific rules based world building. And I think it's just because he doesn't care, because it's not what the story is about. And I think the same is here. Yes, it is true. Yes, we need to state for the record that it is Dany's shine that is being fed upon in this place. Let's just state that. Let's put it out there. But like that's not what the conflict and stakes of the story actually are. So we'll do it and then we'll move past it.
Yeah, I agree. I think King tweeted something about not liking the term world building last week, which I thought was really interesting.
Doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. So Dany decides that he needs to reach out to Tony again. He needs help. He needs to find out what he was supposed to do. So he concentrates and finds himself once again in the nightmare of him hiding in the hallway after taking a wrong turn, a roke-wielding monster right on his trail. But this time, Matt, he's not alone. Dick Halloran is here, reminding him of what he said hundreds of pages ago, that when he really, really needs help, to call for him using the Shining. Dany attempts to call for him right then, but Halloran disappears. And then Dany reaches out for Tony. And we get this, Matt. Tony was far below him, also falling. I can't come anymore, Dany. He won't let me near you. None of them will let me near you. Get Dick. Get Dick. Matt, who is he?
I mean, I think we're meant to ask, is he Jack or someone else? Right? I mean, that's the obvious is, okay, well, if I had to guess, I would guess that it's actually Jack somehow doing this subconsciously. If I had to have a second guess, it would be that there's some dominant presence in the hotel who is a he, and we'll figure that out later, I guess. But there's been so little indication of anything like that I would be really surprised at this point if it came about.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will. I like that, and I think that the not saying right or wrong, but one thing we kind of glossed over that maybe we should have paid a little bit more attention to is this idea that Dany is like really trying to search his dad's head for the thing that he's hiding from him, and he's like really diving into him a little bit more deeply than he normally feels comfortable doing. And there's this really great part where every time he tries, he sees the image of an octopus flying through the air, which he just doesn't understand as the Magneto that was thrown. But every time he does it, Jack becomes like immediately aware that he's doing something and is like starts staring at him really intently. So like we are like really beating this drum that we kind of been talking about from the beginning, that Jack maybe doesn't have the level of power that Dany has, but something powerful is going on inside him as well.
Yeah. I just came up with the theory that I'm almost certain is not correct, but I like it aesthetically, which would be that Tony is actually Jack's subconscious. Because Jack loves Dany and wants the best for him. And Jack suppresses the fact that he has the Shining, but Jack's subconscious knows that it has the Shining, and it also loves Dany, and so it's trying to protect Dany. I don't really think this is true at all. I just think it's a cool idea.
No, that's fun. All right, so from here, Dany finds himself back in his parents' bedroom at the Overlook. The furniture is turned over and destroyed. In the bathroom, Dany finds a clock flashing over and over again. Two things, December 2nd and red rum. And thanks to the mirror and his reading lessons, Dany finally understands what the word means. Of course, we all knew going into this, it's murder. It's murder. So we talked about this before, but I guess the question I have for you now is, why do it this way? Like why create this idea of red rum and murder? What is your read on this? It is not until he sees the reflection in the mirror that he learns what this word is. Why mask it like this? Why do this complicated thing in the first place? You got any ideas?
Oh, I mean, I think the most I've ever thought about this is just to say that it's such a horrifying thought, specifically the thought of a parent murdering their child. It's like the scariest possible thing for a child to imagine. It's almost like impossibly horrifying. and so his mind wouldn't let him see it directly in the same way that he's, you know, chased by this mysterious rope wielding monster, which we know at this point that Danny is clearly intelligent enough to understand this is his father. He is semi-willfully not seeing that it's his father in much the same way that Jack manages to not see all sorts of things, actually.
Yeah.
And so the just the kind of the thought is too horrible for him, and he had to kind of work himself up to it through having all these experiences where I guess you could say he's become a little bit more tinged with the darkness of the place, where now he can confront this thought without it, you know, shattering him, because he's kind of already having to face a lot of these horrors with his father treating him poorly and everything. Anna, did you have a different angle on this?
No, I have no notes. That was exactly what I was thinking. This idea that the truth of the capabilities of his father and the truth of the capabilities of this place were things that were hidden from him. You know, mirrors are often used in stories as you know, obviously reflective surfaces that can reveal truths, right? Allow you to see yourself and see things from a slightly different angle. And I think that's what is being used for here. That this is a thing that Danny could not contemplate that his father would be capable of. And even seeing Red Realm, even understanding that it's murder, I don't think he's still fully come to the full realization that the person that's chasing him is his own father, because that is like this is, I think, in many ways, this is a story about how one of the most powerful relationships, a parent-child relationship, a father-son relationship, can ultimately be destroyed and turn into something horrible, right? And I think one of the things that I love about it so much, and it's so tragic about it, is the idea that his father would hurt him is still, even now, even after being striked across the face, even after having his arm broken, is kind of beyond the pale for Danny. He can't imagine that. He cannot, because who could imagine that your parent could be capable of doing that to you?
Exactly.
Yeah. He's slowly getting there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he wakes up from this vision and he calls out to Dick with all his might. And that is where our chapter and this section of the book ends. We are finished with section 5, snowed in with this as well.
All right.
So that is the end of our reading, Matt. That was section 4. Part 5, Matt, which we will begin next week, is titled Matters of Life and Death.
That's ominous.
All right, so that is it. Next week, we will be beginning that section, Matters of Life and Death. We are going to be reading, I forgot to update it in the script, so now I have to frantically go to my schedule to remind myself of it and vamp as I do this. Chapters 38 through 45 will be what we are covering next week. 38 through 45.
All right, sounds good.
Matt, we're coming around to the home stretch here. We only have 3 more weeks of reading, and then our overall discussion. We're going to be done with this really soon.
It feels about right.
It does. All right, before we go for the week, let's go to our discussion question. Matt, what was last week's question?
What is your favorite scene of a character losing their marbles in fiction?
I had fun with this one. I think our listeners did too.
Yeah, I was pleased with these answers. So from Just Stand 8460, we have Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now, as well as the man he was based on by the same name, from a novella called Heart of Darkness. The movie is in my top 5. Robert Duvall, Martin Sheen, Marlon Brando, Lawrence Fishburne, Dennis Hopper, and even a bit of acting chops from the likes of Harrison Ford. What's not to love? The book, as well as its adaptation, both paint a very dark and haunting picture. The description of the atrocities inflicted by colonialism and the state in which the protagonist finally finds Kurtz slowly leads the reader down into a dark place. It works so well as an adaptation with the Vietnam War. Both are full of ominous tones and eerie scenes. The line that echoes from one medium to the next, the horror. This speaks not only to the inhuman act being perpetrated by the protagonist's own nation, but also the dark place it pulled Kurtz into, despising himself as well as the naivete of the natives and the despicable nature of those in power.
You know, I haven't seen Apocalypse Now in a long time. This feels like a movie I need to revisit pretty soon.
I distinctly remember reading Heart of Darkness in high school and having the experience of like, this is beyond me.
Yeah.
Like
it's so amazing. Like, we didn't know each other till college, but so much of our youth is similar because I literally had the exact same experience.
Like I'm out of my depth here, man, you know? and I feel like I might get a lot more out of it if I looked at it again, actually.
Yeah, we should read and watch that book and film.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We should. That sounds like a fun little circumscribed non-multi-year project that you and I could do.
Can we finish the Ridley Scott thing first, please? Please, let's finish that first.
It would be fun to finish that, and then our next project is literally just read one thing and watch one thing. Yeah, that'd be great.
Next, we have Steve Living Room, who says, Worms got a huge part that was crazy sad and good. Trash Can Man's demise. Steve is giving several examples. Trash Can Man's demise was so well done. Ania going crazy in the final two Hyperion books with losing track of past, present, and future was so good and interesting. The kid, and it's kind of a funny story, was also great and really believable. Roland and Jake simultaneously going crazy was so well written and great. Even had one of the best laughs in the Wastelands when Roland finally admits he is losing his mind due to the paradox of Jake dying/not dying. He hands over his revolvers, and Eddie comments about how the numbfuck apprentices have the guns and the master is unarmed. If something comes big out of the bush at us, Roland, you can always throw your knife at it. At which point, Roland unties that and hands it over. When Eddie takes it, frustrated and saying, "Now can we go?" Roland says, "There is just one more thing." Eddie says, "Weepin', creepin' Jesus." Roland smiles and says, "Just joking." Funny Roland is the best Roland. And yeah, I do love the Roland and Jake kind of simultaneously going crazy stuff. That was a lot of fun parts of Wastelands.
Yeah, no, him reading the essay that he wrote is still one of my favorite moments of that whole series.
Yeah.
Just like, what did I write? It's great. All right, Pear Jane says, I wanted to answer an episode in Buffy season 6. You know the one, Scott. But for spoilers' sake, I'll go with the BBC version of Life on Mars. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it here before. The premise is that the 21st century cop Sam Tyler is hit by a car and wakes up in 1973. Sam lives in gritty, smoky 1970s cop drama, bringing a 21st century sensibility to improve their police work. But he believes he's in a coma, as he keeps hearing the voices of his mother, his doctors, and beeping machines. Only one person in 1973 knows the truth, but she doesn't believe him. She's sure he's hallucinating, and he can't be 100% sure she's wrong. Every time he thinks he knows how to get back home, i.e. wake up from his coma, some element is introduced that proves to him that 1973 is the real world. On rewatch, it's a fascinating Easter egg hunt where he wants to return and stay, and it's hard to identify whether something truly mystical has happened or whether his mind is tricking him into staying because he finds 1973 to be more satisfying. Plus, it's just a really, really good cop show with great characters, an amazing soundtrack, and fantastic writing. It's available for purchase on Prime or on Apple TV, and it's only 2 seasons, so take a weekend and treat yourself.
Wow, that sounds really cool. I kind of want to watch that.
So I watched like the American version of it, and it was okay. This is one of those things where I bet it was better executed in the BBC version.
No, definitely.
It's a cool idea, though.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Yeah. And yes, of course, I knew exactly which episode in Buffy Jane is referring to. It's one of my favorites, actually. I think I've told you about this episode before, just generally, but I don't want to spoil it for those out there. But
okay,
it's a really good episode. Next, we have eman9001, who says, this was a surprisingly tough one to answer. After some contemplation, I think my vote would have to go to Nathan Fielder in The Rehearsal. I think anyone who has seen The Rehearsal would probably agree that a slow, uncontrolled tumble into madness sums up the series nicely. Nathan helps people prepare for difficult conversations by creating large-scale replicas of the settings that these conversations take place and hiring actors to play the individuals with whom the conversations need to be had. Nathan slowly begins to become more and more invested in the process for the show and begins inserting himself in these rehearsals. It's a real treat to watch Nathan being totally disassociate, lose all sense of how to live real experiences, and began rehearsing all the moments of his life that hurt him in an attempt to rewrite his own emotional history. If you haven't watched The Rehearsal yet, you need to, because it's absolutely bananas. Agree 100%. Everyone go watch this right now. It's one of the best things on TV last year. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, I really kind of want to and kind of don't. It sounds like really emotionally heavy and difficult. And
I mean, it is, but it's also a comedy. So it's
Okay.
like it's definitely emotionally heavy, but also you're like laughing at the absurdity of it.
It's just funny to me because every time somebody describes it, they describe it the way you just described it from that answer, which is like, God, that sounds depressing. And then you're like, no, it's really funny. And I'm like, okay, but like that didn't sound funny to me. So,
okay. I mean, that's fair.
I'm sure it is funny. I just,
it is.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
I'll get
Matt,
around to it
watch the
someday.
show.
Okay, I will. TN Bugdoc says, for a descent into madness, I have to give a shout out to HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Faced with irreconcilable conflicts due to his orders, the AI begins to glitch and then spiral out of control, ultimately killing all but one crew member. I love the scene when Bowman finally begins to shut down the rogue machine and it gradually regresses to its primitive stages, ultimately singing Daisy Bell as it shuts down. There are quite a few other classics where the AI goes nuts and does terrible things: Terminator, War Games, The Matrix, and so on, but HAL will always be my favorite.
Hey, y'all, 2001's a really good movie. Don't let people tell you it's boring. It's not. It's great.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. And I agree with that. The HAL losing his mind scene is actually sad, right? Like it's like he's sort of the evil AI antagonist, but you really pity him as Bowman is very, very slowly disassembling him.
You do. I was struggling to come up with an answer. Oh, sorry. This is Do You Keep On Atrocian says, I was struggling to come up with an answer that wasn't obvious. I've not got an answer, but I really love some of these other responses. Matt, so you picked someone who didn't have an answer. Your algorithm is flawed.
Well, they have an honorable mention.
Okay. They have an honorable mention, which is Full Metal Jacket, which is their favorite Kubrick movie. So we got another Kubrick, Matt. We're just hitting them all. It didn't occur to me about Private Pile's slow descent into madness and ultimate suicide. Love the film. I think Stanley Kubrick might just know how to make a movie.
Yeah.
So I think what happened here is another user picked Full Metal Jacket, and Do You Keep On Atrocian agreed with that, and the algorithm picked this one and not the other one.
I guess that honorable mention was it user RR215 anyway?
I think that's what that means. Yes.
All to both people. Yes, that's a great answer. And that's another one where, like, you know, some of these are more like, you know, fun, florid descents into madness from our perspective as the viewer, and you know, HAL and Private Pile, these are just depressing and sad and horrible.
It's true. It's very true.
Nothing very fun about Private Pile's descent into madness. All right, Baby Can You Dig Your Sam says, so many to choose from, particularly if you follow the works of Darren Aronofsky, David Lynch, and Roman Polanski. I'll choose from outside of those. Firstly, it's difficult to beat Jack Torrance's descent into madness. It really is a blueprint of someone losing their mind. The fact that it is occurring simultaneously with supernatural incidents creates more tension, and that you often can't tell what is just in Jack's mind and what is the hotel. Perfection. Other notables include the Salieri character in Amadeus, hell yeah, and Jimmy Stewart's character in Vertigo. Both are men whose obsessions spiral them down into insanity. One of my favorite literary examples, and I've mentioned this before, is a short story called The Yellow Wallpaper. Written by a woman in the late 1800s, it's about a woman who is suffering from postpartum depression, and the treatment recommended by her doctor and followed by her husband is to essentially lock her in an attic room that is adorned with yellow wallpaper. She eventually escapes the confinement of not just the room, but of being a woman in a male-dominated world through her insanity. Yep, great answers. All those, love all of those.
Yeah.
The Salieri one I think is really fun because that's more of a, like, the madness is more just him giving into his darkness, which I think makes it different from a lot of these other ones. Yeah,
and it's too bad we're not allowed to like Vertigo anymore because it is no longer the best movie in the world according to the Sight and Sound poll, which means we have to hate it now. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
That's how that works. I mean, judging by people's reaction to it falling out of the number one spot, that would be what you would think they were saying. That we're not allowed to like it anymore. It's really sad.
You just tell me how I'm supposed to feel, Scott. That's how I live my life.
Well, you hate Vertigo and you love an obscure 3-hour French film that barely anyone has watched.
Yeah, I love that film.
Whose name I'm not even recalling at the moment.
Perfect.
Uh, all right. Stephen Flagg says, as a response to the discussion question, I would like to reference Joaquin Phoenix playing the Joker. Beginning the film, Arthur Fleck is really unstable due to mental disorder coupled with pseudobulbar. What is that? I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is either.
Effect, or the urge to laugh at times not matching his actual emotions. That's what that is, Matt. The answer explains it if you just keep reading, you idiot. As the movie progresses and he is held to ridicule his descent into madness, culminates with shooting Bobby D on live television. Such a wonderful yet heart-crushing portrayal of mental illness. It was, and I have a lot of things I did not enjoy about that movie. But Joaquin Phoenix's performance of a man losing his mind was not one of them.
I still haven't seen that movie.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Who are you?
I know.
Do you know it stars Joaquin Phoenix, one of your favorite actors?
I know.
And it's about the Joker, one of your favorite clowns?
There was just a whole discourse about it, and that just made me really uninterested in engaging with it. But I shouldn't hold that against
the discourse. Was stupid. I hated the discourse.
I shouldn't hold that against the movie, right? I should just be like, okay, whatever. I'll make up my own mind.
Yeah.
I don't let anybody tell me how to feel about things. Never have. All right. Shortstop 88 says, my pick for a main character losing their marbles is Worm. While I kind of want to make sure this
spoilers
isn't a huge spoiler, actually. Yeah. I don't want to read this out. I don't want to read this one out. I mean, good answer. Like absolutely agree, actually. Because the way this character losing their mind in Worm is done is particularly heartbreaking, for all sorts of like really clever, just reasons of character. And it's just really tragic. I love it.
I think one of the things that I think is sometimes a struggle in writing a character losing their mind from the perspective of the character is like, how do you do it in a way that the character doesn't realize that that's what's happening? And I think what this answer is referencing in Worm is just like a really, really great way of doing that, where the character doesn't understand what's happening, but we, the reader, can understand completely what's happening. And it makes it all the more heartbreaking watching them not understand what's happening to their mind. It's really, really well done.
Yeah. Love that, obviously.
Read that Worm book. I told Wildbow the other day that we had brought at least a handful of new Worm readers to him. So we're doing the good work.
Yeah. The entire purpose of this podcast is recruiting Worm readers
to sneak into the Stephen King community and God, I can't talk anymore.
Convert them to Worm readers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why don't I say commute like a sentence? You're free to read Worm.
Yeah.
Gerardo says, here's a bit of a twist of a character losing their marbles. In Poe's The Telltale Heart, the narrator is already mad and is recounting their story, but it's us, the audience, who begins the story believing that we are hearing a rational narrator who is going to explain this perfectly rational actions. They assure us from the start. True. This is a true story. Trust me. They explain that their senses were sharpened, not dulled by the coming events. And look how calmly they explain the story. Can someone insane do that? But as the story unfolds, we see the cracks between the narrator and reality. They describe a man with a vulture eye, and later it's capital letters evil eye. They overemphasize their wise, their calculated, their rational decisions and actions. And best of all, their storytelling evolves from a calm recanting to a crescendo of their rantings and the noise they hear in the room, the beating heart heard above all. And we see with finality that the narrator is divorced from reality and rationality. So it's us who evolve through the telling of the story, not the character. Oh, that's a great answer. I love that.
Yeah. No, that's totally true, because in a sense the character doesn't lose their marbles at all. It is it is that's a fantastic. Yeah.
You already lost them.
It's funny how Poe is endlessly there's no end to appreciating Poe, and he was like the guy who started it all. It's always embarrassing when like we're sitting here like 200 years later or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I mean, the guy who like invented the horror genre basically already did everything. But we're just kind of filling in the margins.
What was it that Jack Torrance referred to Poe as in this thing? It was something great.
Is that old American hack? I think.
It was a hack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't be jealous, Jack.
Yeah.
God, great answer. Awesome answers all the way around. Thank you, everyone. Keep sending them in. The algorithm will surely bless you one day, as it has blessed these 10 people today.
Yes. Now for the sacrifice.
All right. Speaking of questions, next week's question is what is it, Matt? What is it?
This week, mirrors are creepy.
Yep.
And they can reveal a great amount of truths. What is your favorite use of a mirror in storytelling?
That's we've had people say this before. You're not limited to books, right? Obviously, we're a book podcast, but we also love movies and stuff. So if this is a more visual question, so if you want to talk about something a little bit more visual in movies and TV and stuff, please feel free.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Matt, we did it. We're at the end.
Congratulations.
Of this week, not the book. Congratulations. Thanks, Matt. That is it for us here this week. As we said, next week, The Shining will continue with chapters 38 through 45. Once again, that is chapters 38 through 45 as we get closer and closer to the end of this book.
Yeah, remember you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, probably the best place to answer the discussion question is over on the subreddit r/doofmedia.
And make sure you subscribe to this podcast. I don't know why I keep saying this because you're probably all subscribed by now, but make sure you subscribe, please.
Yeah, you better be. Anyway, that threat aside, if you want to support us, please consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah, make sure you do stuff. Because we got that new episode, right? That other level of the tower on 1922. Thomas Jane talks with his teeth together.
And again, like basically like 30 or 40 other King adaptations at this point, which also surely you'll find something to like even if 1922 doesn't sound appealing to you.
We guarantee it. We guarantee it.
Yeah.
Of course, if you cannot afford to help us out financially right now, that is absolutely okay. Please continue helping us share the podcast, get the word out, get more people listening. That helps us too. We love having a lot of people listen to us. It feeds our ego. And as you know, that's very, very important. So keep that up. Also, please send in those rating and reviews. This week's Spotlight review comes from You Don't Fool Me, who gives us 5 stars and says, "A delight. I'm making my way through the series on audiobook, having read them all, some of them several times, and it's such a delight to listen to the Kingslingers dive deep into this rich story. I love their enthusiasm about a story that I hold so close to my heart, and it's so much fun when they point out little details and connections that I also found exciting to discover. The old fan, new fan dynamic works great, and I'm so glad these two guys decided to take the idea and run with it. Long days and pleasant nights." That was very nice of you. Thank you.
Wow. We really did take that idea and run with it, didn't we?
We ran marathons and marathons and marathons. Yeah.
Ultra marathons. Yes. That's great.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone who continues to take the time to send in those rating and reviews. We do appreciate that. Another book lives another day. Matt, you're saved. You don't have to burn any books.
Thank God.
All right, folks, that's it for us this week. We will see you right back here next week at the exact same time with some more exciting chapters. And, prediction, Matt. Let's make a prediction right here. Jack, he's going to be fine.
Okay.
He's going to be totally fine.
Yeah. It's going to be, they're going to leave somehow.
Yeah. That December 2nd was flashing on the screen. Now we know it's December 1st. So they're going to wake up and they're going to say, you know what? Kind of done with this place.
Yeah.
Let's head home.
Yeah, man, I am bored of this hotel. I'm just bored of it.
Let's just get out of here.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.